You're listening to Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, a new conversation space where educators and leaders explore what it truly means to lead with purpose, courage, and heart. Join Dr. Manley and myself, Jim Cummins, as we share the inspiration behind Lifted and how purpose-driven leadership can transform schools and communities. This is Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose.
When Jim and I founded Lifted, our goal was to support leaders through sustained coaching, systems thinking, and practical development. Beyond the Bell flows from that same heart, creating space for leaders to reflect, learn, and be encouraged as they lead with purpose. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Jim Van Allan to the show. Dr. Van Allan is the president of the Energy Bus for Schools and co-author, along with best-selling author John Gordon, of the Energy Bus for Schools, 7 Ways to Improve Your School Culture, Remove Negativity, Energize Your Teacher, and Empower Students. Through his work, Dr. Van Allan helps schools and districts build positive culture through mindset, teamwork, communication, and intentional leadership. He speaks to schools and districts across the country through keynotes, trainings, workshops, student assemblies, and coaching for school leaders and superintendents. He also brings a strong background in communication. He's a professor of communication studies and lead speech instructor at Kaiser University, where he teaches public speaking, interpersonal communication, and business communication. His academic work also connects directly to this conversation. Dr. Van Allan earned his PhD in educational leadership from Kaiser University, where his research focused on the impact of an early version of the Energy Bus for Schools program and sustainable professional development for schools. Dr. Van Allan, we're grateful to have you today.
And I'm grateful to be here. Looking forward to this conversation for sure. Thank you.
Very much. Instead of us doing all the talking, you want to introduce yourself to our listeners a little bit and share your journey and what continues to drive your work with schools.
And my journey is one where I'm one of those lucky guys, blessed guys, where I kind of knew what I always wanted to do starting out. And then, kept having that vision in my heart through college that I want to be a speaker, right? I want to help people to thrive. Like it wasn't about me being up there in front of people. It was more about, I loved having messages that I know were changing hearts and minds, right? And I was just the vessel and the vehicle in which to deliver that. And I had a lot of fun doing it. But when you're young, you're not sure, well, what do you do with this? Like, I'm good at this. I like doing this. So, through college and high school, like I met different speakers and I heard different people speak, and I was on one path of kind of going into corporate public relations type work, and in an internship, and friends of mine saw John Gordon, an up and coming speaker in 2006, speaking in Jacksonville. And they're like, hey, we saw this guy speak. He reminds us so much of you. We know you want to be a speaker. And I said, oh, well, all right, I'll email him. So I emailed him out of the blue, August of '06, and just said, I'd love to learn from you. I'm at the University of Florida. You're in Jacksonville. We're so close to each other. And he wrote me back, gave me his cell phone number. And then from there, that was '06, right? I started out as his first ever intern, helped him launch the Energy Bus book, which is a story in itself. And now, 18, 19 years later, I'm now running his entire school division, education division. So, because I kind of found my niche with educators. My PhD is in ed leadership. My master's is communication. I teach in higher ed. I spent a little bit of time in K-12, but I've also just always been in that environment, consulting and leading and working with schools. And John and I were like, this is your thing. This is your calling. This is your niche. This is where you need to be. And it's been an amazing journey, trying to help these people. Like I said, when I started at the beginning, why? I want to help people to thrive. I want to help them to move from thought to action. So many people think about the things they want to do better, then they don't actually do it, or they don't do it with excellence, right? So to me, it's about building those consistent habits and also showing people, hey, here's what is possible. Here's a million schools I've worked with and districts I've worked with who have amazing culture. Let me give you their secrets, right? Or let's adapt it to what you're doing. So it's a little bit of all that, but I love being with educators. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else.
Awesome. Hey, I want to make sure, because I imagine most of our listeners know about the Energy Bus, but let's let's give them at least a teaser in case they haven't read it or aren't familiar with it.
So essentially, it's a fable, right? It's a fable, and a very short kind of Reader's Digest version. You have a main character, George, who is miserable and negative. He's on the verge of losing his wife, his family. Like, wife's gonna leave him. Right? His job. He's a executive at a company, and but he's on the verge of losing that as well. Why? Because he's so ensconced in negativity. He's not willing to get out of it. Okay, he's miserable and negative. He wakes up one morning, goes to his car, and realizes he's got a flat tire. Okay, his wife won't drive him to work. Nobody's gonna come drive him, folks. This is '06. There's no Uber back then. Okay, in the Stone Ages, right? So he's got to walk and go on the city bus to get into the city. And he's getting on this bus and he is just downtrodden and negative. And he meets Joy, the bus driver. And Joy is just bubbly, amazing personality. She is loving and warmth and just a realness to her. And she, along with a cast of characters on that bus, the other passengers, start to pour into George, and they give him one energy bus rule. So the book has 10 rules, 10 principles that kind of help you. They give him one at a time, and they ask him to, think about it, use it, come back. So, and he does this cycle, this process, and he slowly begins to kind of change his life and his mindset. And, newsflash, there's a good ending, right? And he turns things around, but he had to want to do that, and he had to get some help along the way. And that's a nice mix of those two things. So it's a relatable story, especially for schools, because the essence of the whole book is the bus. How do we have this culture change or this change together, right? Joy, George, the other cast of characters, how do we do this thing together? That's why so many schools have gravitated towards the concept of the energy bus or being an energy bus together, identity focused school.
It's if you've never read it, definitely would encourage you to do that as a leader. It's one of those books as well, and Dr. Cummins knows. In my family, it's my fault, kind of that geek when we go on car trips and different things, and the impact this book had on us is we listen to audiobooks. And so listening to the Energy Bus when my kids were young and having conversations about energy vampires, and then seeing it in different, whether it's the schools I've been into or even I've been into convenience stores and things like that. And so a really, really great book for both professional and personal life. And, I see in the background the children's book. That's a book that I've given away to other families too. So thanks for sharing that piece.
Yeah, it's the kids' book, and then John and I wrote the school version where it was all about, hey, how have schools and districts used the original book to build culture? So there's a whole universe out there and more to come. So
So what drew you to John's work and also being in communications, thinking about going into, corporate world, what kind of drew you to the work he was doing and kind of sparked that connection?
when I really started, you know, digging into what his work was, and so he sent me an early version of the Energy Bus. He sent it to me as a Word document, which is funny to think that the book is now 4.5 million copies worldwide 20 years later, and I saw it when it was a Word doc. Like it's and then got to launch the book with him on his team. I think what it really was the simplicity of his work. And John will tell you that anytime he's worked with me on developing a keynote or helping write the Energy Bus for schools, simple, 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 right? And because the simple is the most powerful. John's work unlocks the things that you know, but you've cast them aside because it's not in the automatic part of your brain. Like we know how to. He'll always talk about what's the framework. What are the simple 4 steps to build culture, right? When you're talking about you're doing your keynotes, give a main heading principle, a story with it, and an application. move on, right? So John believes in structure and kind of simplicity. And I love that because when people are now reading his work and listening to my messaging, which I've learned from John on how to message, right? We make sure that it is to the point, it is relevant, and it is kind of compartmentalized. And I like that. John's work is it's very real. Like his new book coming out is about the power of positive habits. Who can't use more of that, right? Positive leadership he's had, understanding your purpose in the seed. Very relatable, simple topics shared in either fable ways, which is a story, right, or case studies. Hey, here's how others have used this. So either way, you can visualize it and use it immediately, and I love that about it.
So we've taken the energy bus, and then you've co-authored the energy bus specifically for schools. Within that book, you've got some different lessons and a framework. You want to talk about any of that work or any of those pieces within your book that build off the energy bus that really focus on helping schools?
Well, we understood that we wrote the book starting in 2022, 23, but it was really starting to generate even before 2020. And what's funny is like leads coming in pre 2020 and after 2020, exactly the same. Like people think this burnout thing in education is just the last 5 years. No, I was hearing and seeing the same things in 2014 when I was talking to principals, in 2012, in 2018. So it's not, this isn't a new thing. Like, so John and I were seeing this incredible, a uptick in burnout in educators, and then just this shift in educational culture on needing to elevate public schools nationwide, which means that's going to put a lot of pressure on our teachers and our principals and leaders, right? When there's pressure coming from feds and state and local. The joke is always the assistant principal has to make one person happy, the principal, but the principal has to make like 100 people happy with board and supers and parents and everybody. So the pressure is there. So John and I saw, kind of understood this, and people like to tell their story to us, right? When we're out there and schools and in talking on leads and talking to people are always sharing their story. We're getting so many stories that we're like, all right, we need to write this thing. We need to show people what is possible when you use the concept or the theories from Energy Bus into your school and what that can do. So that was essentially the genesis of that book. And then as you go through the book John and I wrote, we give probably 50 or 60 examples of what other schools have done that you could turn around the next day, go to your school leadership culture team and say, hey, let's try some of these, right? We see that they're working. Let's try them here. So that's essentially the framework, right? We want to address burnout and negativity. We want to address the pressure of performing, and then give people real strategies that they can use to help boost their culture, which we believe if you can get culture down, you can have a great school culture. Everything else falls into place. Your data numbers, your attendance numbers, your engagement from parents volunteering, from fundraising, from your PTA. I mean, why on earth would I want to give money to something that I don't really care about or I don't see them growing? Like, you know what I'm saying? Even the school, you're like, well, but you have a school that is an alive place and it's connecting with people. People are going to want to come and donate their time and their resources and their talents to that. So there's a lot of things connected to culture, but that's why we believe you have to start there and then everything else kind of falls into place.
Let's take that a next step because there's definitely speaking Nathan and I's language. That was we knew that if we could change the culture, we could bring people along, and it just makes people want to belong, want to come to work. But there's a difference between positive culture and just an overt attempt to make everything look rosy and shiny. So how do you the leader that's has to acknowledge that there are challenges, but keeping it positive, leading with that hope. What are your recommendations for that leader?
Don't ignore the negative things. Don't ignore the hard things, right? And that's the thing. And then John and I be the first to tell you, like reading this work, reading his books, bringing Energy Bus to campus doesn't mean you put on what we call rose-colored glasses and it's Pollyanna positive, right? And that's not what this is about because then people feel isolated and they feel like you're just band-aiding things, and that is in itself toxic positivity, right? When you're just saying, well, just be positive, it'll all work out when you give the cliche answer and then you don't do anything, right? Cliche without action is toxic positivity, okay? You want to say those things, great, but then there has to be action behind it. And that's what I would tell the leaders. So it starts with not ignoring the negative things. And now, how do you address the negative things? Well, go to the heart of the issue, go to people. I have talked so much about how it is in my what I've seen, okay, because we can only give it based on what I've seen and who I've worked with. The one-on-ones, the small group type sessions, principals, superintendents, leaders, right, need, and even teachers with their own students, right, on every level, need to be checking in daily with people, weekly having small group little meetings, and where you're not talking curriculum, you're not talking the math curriculum, you're talking about it's like a therapy session. You're talking culture, you're talking how are they feeling, mental health, those things, and then you will hear the challenges people are facing, and then as long as you're documenting them, you're at least doing two things. You're helping people to share, okay? But you're not promising them results because there's some things, and I can't get into specifics, I don't have them right now, but there's some things that we can't solve every little thing, right? But you can create that space for people to be authentic and share and feel like they're being heard. And that's a great thing. That's going to build trust. But the other part of it is there are going to be some things that you're not aware of, right? By doing walkthroughs in the building and staff meetings. I'm not a big fan of trying to go this deep in a staff meeting. Staff meeting to me, and I'm not a big meeting guy, right? I'm not a big meeting guy. I'm like, you have a meeting if there is a specific purpose. The staff meeting to me is about big announcements related to everyone. Here's what's coming up. You know what I'm saying. It's big announcements type things. PD we all need to be doing right now, whatever the case is. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty on culture, you got to go to the one-on-ones or the small groups, and that's going to help you get everybody's ideas out. If you try to do that in a staff meeting, the extroverts will talk, no problem, and they're going to be very vocal. And some people are going to get it's going to get a little elevated in there emotionally, right? I want to stay away from that. The introverts won't say anything. But if you go to the one-on-ones or the small group style, then everybody will talk equally and you'll have much, much more data to go on. Qualitative data where it's words, right, versus just a few at a staff meeting. So that's the way that would be my big take for leaders as you're trying to figure out, well, how do I lead this school? It's a little bit of both, right? The big staff meeting, the one-on-ones, the small groups, so you can accurately capture all the challenges happening on campus and then address it.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we always recommend, I mean, collaboration and professional learning communities. And just talk about like putting a professional learning community framework and system in place is the easy part. Putting 4 or 5 adults around a table and saying do deep, meaningful work becomes tricky. And so being able to have those conversations, and I love how you talk about addressing those based on your relationship and trust in small, psychologically safe moments that you've created. But it's not ignoring it. It's actually getting deeper to the root of the problem, being a good listener, and being a problem solver. So, I mean, just fantastic to hear you share that. So, with your background in communication, what do you think school leaders sometimes underestimate about the way communication shapes culture?
Well, I think when it comes to communication, I think you have a lot of leaders on school campuses that they don't take into account how every conversation and email and interaction is to me, it's either building trust, right? Or it is quietly draining it. Because the life of a school leader, building leader, is built on micro conversations. I mean, you're having interactions all the time. And you have to be aware of your nonverbals during those interactions. Like nonverbals are for the ranges of 60 to 90%. I'm a believer that is in the higher range. And you have to understand everything is sending a message from even to how you have your office arranged, okay, to what you're displaying on your walls, right? To your use of haptics and touch. Like everything sends a message, and everybody's always trying to interpret those messages. So that's why communication is it's not far-fetched to say it's everything because it's the lifeblood of leadership and culture. It is how we interact and talk and treat each other and look each other in the eye and show respect and show love and develop relationships. You cannot develop a relationship without communication. You cannot develop trust and authenticity without communication. And communication is always a very broad term. So to get specific, right? I think staff members, staff in school, they need more of what some OGs would call the dreaded team building or potlucks or coffee chats or we're meeting at the bowling alley or they need more of that. And some of you are clenching in your seat right now listening, but that's because I'm right. Because what I've seen listen, I have been to so many schools, and I always ask one question to PD. We always have a spot before communication. I look around, I say, raise your hand. There's people on this campus, adults on this campus, that you've never actually had what you would call a real conversation beyond, wow, it's hot out, right? And and I can say this honestly, every single audience I've been to, over half the hands go up. Even in schools where there's 22 people, right? And you think, oh, they all know each other. No, they do not. And I always kind of wink at the principal. I'm like, that's why we're doing this, right? That's why. That's why we have to do this. We have to have these conversations now, but there has to be parameters in place and I don't want to call it forced communication. That's a bad term. But how about we encourage more interaction beyond your clicks? Because the teachers will form the cliques like the kids do, the grade level leads. And a lot of it is unintentional to a point because you're hanging out with your grade. All the third grade teachers are all buddies, right? All the history they got their text chain. I'm talking elementary, right? So, but think about the day you come in, go through the office maybe, drop your bag off, and you're in your room, right? And then you're with the kids. And some people will eat in their room or they'll eat for the 20 minutes in the break room, then they're gone, right? So there's not a lot of that. There's a lot of silo time there. So I believe going beyond that within reason. Like we don't need to be, know your staff. You don't need to go from 0 to 100 where you're like, all right, we're all going to the circus. It's like, where did that come from? Like, let's build up to it a little bit. Okay. But I have high school in Ohio, and you know how I love high school teachers, but come on, like they, they're a tough bunch. When I get a high school booking for a PD, I'm like, all right, I got to roll up my sleeves here, right? It's just not, it's a different bunch. But I have a high school, they do it's like every other Friday, somebody brings in a different coffee and they brew it and they all go to I don't know, they have a cafeteria hangout area, just the teachers. 20 minutes before school, 20 minutes. And they always give a rule. We're not talking shop. We're not talking, well, this kid is bad or curriculum. We're just interacting. And they've been doing that for years. And guess what? They're an energy bus school and they're an amazing place to work. So that's a big part of it. That leaders have to be aware of how powerful those moments are and how powerful relationship building is to overall mental health and well-being and culture of a school.
Yeah, I love that, and I can't can't agree more in how do we create systems where they can get deeper. But for the listener that's out there that says, I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Um, that don't understand some of the nonverbal things. What communication mistakes create confusion, negativity, disconnection? What are some things maybe that they can file away to next time they think, oh, that's one that he mentioned might be a negative?
So believe it or not, when you're talking to somebody, um, the most honest part of the body is the feet. Believe it or not, people always think, "Oh, it's the eyes." What's the one that really can't tell a lie? Oh, everybody else says it's eyes. It's your face, but that's the one you're trying to control the most. You're trying to control your eye contact. You're trying to control your facial expressions, but it's the feet. And what I mean by that is if you're facing somebody and you but my foot is kind of cocked outward or I'm kind of like angled away and my foot's angled away non-verbally, I'm looking at you and we're talking and I'm smiling and I'm nodding, I'm doing everything I should, but the feet should tell us a different story. It's telling somebody that I want to be going the opposite way, like its foot is towards the door. Okay, and then the body starts to turn a little bit. So like I said, everything sends a message. So next time you're talking to somebody, really try to have a square open position with them. If they're talking to you, you're square to their shoulders and the feet are as well. And if you're seated, you're trying to angle towards them and leaning in and nodding and paraphrasing as they go because somebody comes and talks to you, you know, that's their big thing in their brain, but you have a million things running around your brain. So now all of a sudden you have to now switch and block out your to-do list and your stressors and listen what they're saying. And the way you can stay on track is by kind of asking questions as you clarifying questions, paraphrasing back. Oh, yeah. So you told me, so you think that this is blah, blah, blah. Like, so you're actually kind of paraphrase back and asking questions. That keeps you engaged and also there's a little bit of performative nature here when it comes to communication. And what I mean by that is you have to show the other person you're listening. You can't assume that they know that. So that's why I said there's a performative element in here. I'm going to make sure I'm seated. I'm seated. I'm turning towards them. I'm asking these questions. But if you do all those things, it will help keep you engaged and help show the other person that you are listening because you don't ever want somebody to walk away saying, I'm never talking to them again, or they were looking at their phone, or they were facing the other way on their email. So like I said, remembering the performative nature of it will help you. I don't think people need to stress about every little detail they're doing, but just being generally aware of body positioning and where their mind is will help you um, lower the misconceptions that can happen when two people communicate, right? Too many misconceptions can happen. So we want to eliminate those or limit them as much as possible.
You could have said a lot of body parts, and I wasn't going to guess feet.
Yep.
But it makes sense. I mean,
Next
just
time you talk to somebody, no matter where you are, just keep an eye. You're gonna just glance down and just see, okay, and glance at your own feet as well, and your body. Like I've talked to some people where I'm like kind of angled away, and it's like, and you're kind of on like I don't know how to do it, but like a wall, like a 90-degree angle with somebody, and it's like, well, we're not really connecting here, you know. So just being aware of those things, and if and here's the thing: if you see somebody else doing that, it's okay. It doesn't mean they don't like you. Maybe they have to. Maybe they got to run, right? Maybe they got to go get their kid or something. You know, they got to leave, and you just read that and readjust and say, "Hey, let me catch up with you a little bit or a little later," right? And you go from there, and then they're ready. So,
One of the things that I've seen, and we even call it out sometimes in admin meetings or whatever, but phones. People need when you're having a meeting, you need to put your phone away. Turn it off, put it in your pocket, take that distraction away because I've seen, I just think it can take away your attention like that when you even if you're just looking away to see what was that message. you lose that connection that you had going because they're like, oh, they just checked out for a second. So,
Yeah, if you're in a meeting, if you're in a one-on, like so if my leaders, if you're listening and you're doing the one-on-ones or the small groups or staff meetings, you know, there's no reason why their phone should be out. You know what I'm saying? Because like you're saying, like the attention needs to be here, and it's good for our brains to kind of disconnect from the phone for a little bit because once you hear the buzz of the chime, you're out for a good 45 seconds because now you're thinking, well, who was that? Or if you don't look at the phone, you're like, who was that? Is something wrong? And you're just anxious. You hear that buzz or beep, and you're like, I don't want to look at it because they're talking, and my phone's flipped over. But then all of a sudden, you're checking out for a minute or two, and then the first thing you do is, who was it, right? So your mind is drifting towards who was that instead of what the message is. So, but once again, we have to communicate that. Right. I officiated a wedding a couple months ago for my brother-in-law. It's a big honor, but and he told me, hey, as the officiant, when you're up there before we come down, he's like, I want you to say this is a technology-free ceremony. Let's have all their phones away. So I had to communicate that to everyone. People don't know that. So leaders have to communicate, hey, it's staff meetings, let's put our phones in our bags, right? Or, one-on-ones, be a leader and just, you don't have to be rude about it, but just say, let's put our phones away. I'm going to do it too, so we can just look at each other and talk. Sometimes we have to clearly just put those expectations out there. And, for the sake of having a good, honest conversation.
So, Dr. Van Allen, the subtitle of the book talks about energizing teachers and empowering students. In a talk about why that was important to make sure that the clarity there and how those go hand in hand and why those two ideas matter so much.
I'm going to get my copy of the book out here as well so I can see it all with you here. So, yeah, that was a big part for John and I to talk about that. Some people thought it was a long title, but John's like, listen, we want to really share with them what this is about. And if you look at that term I'm looking at here, like energize your teachers, okay? So if you want to have students who are engaged and parents that are giving their time and volunteering and if you want to have all that that starts with the teachers, right? It starts with the adults. They need to be the ones that are really driving culture. They need to some of them have to rediscover that love for the role, the job. Others, energizing to me is just being engaged, right? Having a support system, sharing the load a little bit, because then that'll make you more energized as an educator. When you're an energized educator, to me, you're being innovative,
Mm.
right? If I'm energized, man, I want to come up with something cool, new lesson or a new incentive or a new way of doing this or a fun game that also teaches. If I'm not energized, am I really going to put in extra effort? If you had a long day, you want to just chill out on a Friday night, right? After a long week. Do I want to get up and go run a 5K? No, right? So, the energy will a lot of times dictate the innovation. And then somebody else sees, oh wow, look what they're doing, look what they're doing, right? And we're teachers and educators are very much like that. Everybody, we all know this. Schools, what are they doing? What are they doing? How can I build from there? How can we take that and make it us? Like, it's called legal theft, right? Where we take ideas and we use them, right? Or we make them better, and that's a good thing. It's called to me, it's sharing. It's sharing ideas, but the has to start with the teachers on campus being energized. And the other part of this conversation too is if they're energized, if they have a good support system on campus, they have a leader that respects them, they feel like they can be innovative and creative, then they won't leave,
Yeah.
right? They won't leave laterally. And like I said, you never want to blame anyone for taking a job it's a promotion in another district, or in that same district. That's by all means, that's wonderful. But you don't want people to jump schools or jump districts and make a lateral move. That one to me hurts more. And it's cost so much money to retrain people and get them part of your culture. That energize your teachers. You focus on that one first. That's going to have big ramifications later on.
That's gold. I mean, just great advice.
Yeah. Mhm.
One of the things that, I mean, I think 35, 40 minutes is hard to get into all what it takes to build culture in any organization, but certainly love some of the tips and just realization that it starts with conversations. It starts with um, reflective work from the leaders about what am I doing to create a culture? What systems, processes do we have in place that allow those things to nurture? One of the things we always talk about on these podcasts for leaders, their jobs are heavy. We know that there's a burden that comes with leadership. What are some things that, as you lead, as you've gone through stressful times in your career, how do you take care of your own well-being? We always want to give our leaders tips on their own their own well-being, their own mindset. What re-energizes you?
Well, so to me, it's about time. So if you think about the life of an educator, school leader, teacher, even the work that a lot of us do on the road, speaking and traveling and consulting and working with these places, it's a lot of outward energy, right? We're talking, we're communicating, we're giving, we're sharing, all the time. So to me, I like to have my own time when I need it, right? It's what I mean by that is, I love to exercise. I pray, I read, to take walks, right? And to me, those are the times where I feel like I'm getting recharged, I'm getting ideas. Even sometimes after everybody goes to bed, right? Just staying up for not all the time, an hour or so, just kind of just being with myself and having some time, I feel like is super helpful. Even if I got to stay up a little bit later, guess what? I can drink some coffee in the morning. Like it's not a regular thing, right? It's that the sleep is good and being healthy, but enjoying the silence and not always having to have earbuds in or not always having to be in the screen doing something is so important for our own brains and so important for me as well. So I would say whatever that looks like, if you have a commute or a drive, I always laugh at people. I'm like, if you have a little bit of a drive, hey, listening to the podcast is a wonderful thing to do. I said, but also every once in a while, just try driving in silence and just I like how many of you have ever done that? And people look at me like, I don't know if I've ever actually done that, right? If you think about it, we're still simulated throughout the whole day in a school, and you get in your car and you have radio or somebody blasting at you for a half hour, and you go home and there's family there. It's like you never get your mind time to kind of just settle, right? And just be still for a little while you drive or do something. It's really good for our brains in a very overstimulated, technology-driven world.
It's funny you say that because when you talk about coming home, I never realized how chaotic things were when we were raising kids and we had kids in the house, even from little, even in high school when they were still here. There was just always something going on. Well, when they left and it was just Renee and I, we it took us a while, but we got used to that silence and just some time to read or reflect. And then all of a sudden, the grandkids and the family come in, and you're like, oh, I'm reminded of what it was like when we were young. And until you've kind of seen both sides of that, I don't know that you really understand the value of that silence and just that quiet time. Because as parents, and a lot of leaders are not only leading, they're raising families, there is not much silent time in your day. So great wisdom there.
And as we wrap up, Dr. Van Allen, any whether it's in regards to the book, any wisdom for leaders and or ways to, we'll put the link in the bio to the book, ways to get connected more with your work and the energy bus for schools.
I've loved being on here. I love the conversation. I hope everyone listening has found some value in this. I think my last kind of in part to everybody is, you don't have to change everything overnight. I think there's a pressure or a desire to be like, I have to do this right now, right? It's not an overnight thing. Newer principles, the research shows, if you're brand new, it may take you 3, 4 years to get your culture, your vision going, your hiring right. It's going to take some time, right? It's not an overnight thing. I think people get stressed because, oh my gosh, my data numbers haven't improved here or there after a while. I'm like, well, it's been 1 year. Like,
Mm.
did you show some improvement? Like, or where have you found some other wins, right, that you can build off of? So it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. And that's why I think the energy bus is so important because George, the main character, transformed after a process. Every school that John and I write about in the Energy Bus for Schools book has gone through a process, okay, of either getting a bond passed to create new buildings, either of a school that had 5 principals in 7 years that I worked with. Like they went through a process to get where they needed to be. It's not an overnight thing. So that's a big part of this, and that's what I believe that is the heart of the energy bus and the energy bus for schools is we want driven, creative leaders that can have some grace along the way in the process and to discover what they want to do. And I love talking about this in the Energy Bus for Schools podcast that I do in the work that we do with schools and creating Energy Bus schools. You can become an Energy Bus school where you're actually bringing some of the concepts to life with classroom activities and monthly coaching and assemblies guides and one singular focus that we are going to be a positive school. And we're going to have the Energy Bus just help guardrail that process. And our site is simple. It's Energy Bus for Schools, FOR schools.com. We're all on social media too with those same terms. And I actually have 2 teachers that are at one of my Energy Bus schools. I brought them in to run the social media for Energy Bus for Schools. So if you'll see them a lot, being very creative with what they're doing because they're actually in a school doing it. So we try to connect with people in a very real way.
We appreciate it, and I love one of the things that you just said. It's about simple changes. You don't. It does. It's not. I don't want to say it's not important. It's not rocket science. It's things that you can do, routines that you can put in place, and I think everybody that's listening could take something away from today. So really appreciate you being here and best wishes as you continue your own personal journey.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This conversation is a great reminder that culture is not something schools create by accident. It's shaped through the leaders' communication, the mindset they model, the way teams work together, and the daily practices that help people feel connected with their purpose and what they come to school for. Your work through the Energy Bus gives leaders a practical and hopeful framework for improving culture, removing negativity, energizing teachers, and empowering leaders. To our listeners, we hope today's conversation encourages you to think about the energy that you bring, the culture that you help create, and the ways that you lead with more purpose, clarity, and encouragement. If your district is interested in sustained leadership coaching, systems work, culture building, or professional development, Nathan and I would be glad to visit with you about how Lifted can partner with you in that work. Until next time, be well and keep leading with purpose beyond the bell.